think you've got a green thumb. Just wait till you see the natural world's craziest cultivators. We're counting down the top 10 most extreme gardeners in the animal kingdom to find the hardest working horticulturalist. It's time to weed 'em and reap when gardeners are taken to the most extreme.
Earth is a planet of extremes. Extreme places. And extreme animals. But some animals are more extreme than others. Join us as we count down to find the most unusual and the most extraordinary on Animal Planet's The Most Extreme. Number 10.
Gardening can be hard work. From digging to fertilizing, planting to harvesting, making things grow can be tricky. And yet, not everybody likes getting their hands dirty. Once people thought that a remote-controlled lawnmower would mean that you could garden from the comfort of your chair. And while our first contender lacks this sophisticated technology, it has found a way to grow a most unusual plant from the comfort of a perch that's high in the sky. This is where you find mistletoe. While most people know that mistletoe is a great way to get a kiss at Christmas, few realize that it's actually a parasite. There are about 90 species of mistletoe in Australia alone, and they all send out roots that penetrate the bark of trees and siphon off water and nutrients. The question is, how did they get up to these aerial gardens in the first place? Well, the answer lies with the animal flying in to number 10 in the countdown, the mistletoe bird. It specializes in popping open the parasite's ripe berries and swallowing the sticky contents. Thanks to the bird's modified digestive system, it only takes half an hour for the mistletoe seed to pass undamaged from beak to bottom. And that's when the bird starts gardening. Simply by wiping its bottom, the mistletoe bird manages to plant the sticky Klingon in the perfect position to form a new aerial garden. And while it's fun to watch the mistletoe bird's rear end waggle, these people are queuing up to see a very different Pui plant at the Huntington Botanical Garden in San Marino, California.
I think the flower is beautiful, the smell is not so good.
Worse than baby's poop.
The Titan arum is the world's largest flower. The 6-foot bloom is extremely rare, even in its native habitat on the Indonesian island of Sumatra. It's not something you'd want in your garden, unless you like the smell of rotting meat. Also called the corpse flower, it uses its potent pong to attract pollinating flies and dung beetles. This massive plant is notoriously difficult to grow. Life would be so much easier for botanists if they could work like a mistletoe bird. All it takes is a wipe of the bottom and the seed's good to go. The mistletoe's developing root quickly penetrates the branch of its host and starts siphoning off all the nutrients it needs. The mistletoe bird is number 10 in the countdown because its garden is so self-sufficient that it requires very little help to grow. However, as the countdown continues, we'll discover animals that must work even harder if they're to taste the fruits of their labor.
Number 9.
Compost is a gardener's best friend, so it's no wonder that people work hard to create nature's very own fertilizer. It's a matter of collecting all kinds of organic material and then letting it gently decompose. But there's an easier way to create compost. All you have to do is call on our next contender, the earthworm. It's the only animal in the countdown that actually helps us in the garden. That's because 24 hours a day, these squirming waste disposal units turn organic trash into compost. Just ask the worm shepherd, Jonathan Craig from Yakima, Washington. Deep in the bowels of his basement, he breeds earthworms to sell to gardeners across America and believes that everybody should worship the worm.
I am the worm shepherd because I believe that without worms, we would not even be here doing this right now. The reason why not is because without worms, there would be no food. And without food, there would be no people. Ancient civilizations, even before Egypt, Sumeria, used worms extensively in their agriculture. Agriculture was born using worms.
To find out why these slimy gardeners are so important, you just have to imagine what it would be like if we lived like an earthworm. We'd be found beneath the garden in a complex network of burrows that help plants by aerating the soil and acting like drain pipes for water. But most important would be our insatiable appetite for dead vegetation. We'd even go up to the surface to drag down leaves so we could feast on them at our leisure. And since we'd consume our own weight in rotten vegetation every day, we'd produce an awful lot of waste products. For gardeners, worm excrement is black gold. It's nature's very own compost, delivered right to the plant's front door. The waste products of earthworms are packed with vitamins and minerals that plants need for growth. And now it seems that
Number 8.
The next contender in our countdown of the most extreme gardeners has an unhealthy interest in flowers. Sure, we think they're pretty, but it pays to remember that we're actually looking at a display of a plant's reproductive organs. Human gardeners have been using this information to breed different plant varieties for more than a century. First, they expose the long, sticky stalk that's the flower's female reproductive organ. Then they collect pollen sacs from another plant. By transferring the male pollen grains onto the female stalk, the plant is artificially fertilized by human gardeners. It's a technique that's been practiced for countless generations by the animal crawling in to number 8 in the countdown. This is a female tinnin wasp from Australia. She has no wings, so she's forced to crawl up the stems of flowers to catch, not the eye, but the nose of a passing male by releasing a perfume of pheromones. When the winged male flies down, he takes her in his arms, sweeps her off her feet, and mates with her in midair. It's this behavior that makes the male a wonderful gardener, if you're a Drachea orchid. Its flower looks like a female tenon wasp, and what's more, it produces a perfume that mimics the wasp's pheromones. When a male follows this chemical come hither, he becomes an unwitting gardener. As he tries to carry away this vegetable female, he swings within range of the plant's sticky pollen sacs. Undeterred by the pollen on his back, he tries his luck with another orchid. Only this time, his struggles deposit pollen onto the plant's female reproductive organ. But this isn't the only plant that completely manipulates its gardener. There are plenty more growing here at California Carnivores, a macabre nursery just north of San Francisco that houses the world's largest collection of meat-eating plants. In this savage garden, there are all kinds of ways to fool insects, as Peter D'Amato explains.
Most pitcher plants lure nectar-feeding insects with nectar that has drugs in it, and it makes them rather intoxicated. Inside of the pitcher, there are glands that, very much like an animal's stomach, secretes acids and enzymes that are mixed with water. So the fluid inside is kind of like your stomach, where the digestive acids and enzymes are what break the insects down once they're caught and drowned. This is the leaf of an American pitcher plant, which grows in the eastern United States, and you can see that these catch literally thousands of insects. In here are the digested remains. These are the exoskeletons, the shells of the insects. All the nutrients are absorbed through the cell walls of the pitcher. So it's almost like they're catching vitamin pills with legs and wings. Many people are surprised to know that the United States has the widest variety of carnivorous plants in the world. The vast majority are not tropical at all. This, of course, is the most famous carnivorous plant, the Venus flytrap. It has traps that are shaped like clam shells or taco shells, and they're lined with very sharp little teeth. But inside of the trap are 6 to 8 little trigger hairs that are so tiny they're almost microscopic. There's nectar at the base of the teeth, and nectar-feeding insects will climb inside to drink the nectar. When they do, they have to touch 2 of the little trigger hairs within 20 seconds to spring the trap. What happens is amazing. Electricity runs through the outside cells of the leaf, and it causes the cells to triple in size in less than a second. And the trap will warp together, imprisoning the insect. And I'll show you what I mean. Got a nice tasty slug for this fly trap here. We'll hit the trigger hairs. And you can see how it has snapped shut. They've always appeared in, like, movies.
Feed me food.
The most popular recent movie was Little Shop of Horrors. We don't have any man-eating or woman-eating plant here, but with gene splicing, who can tell what we might be able to develop 10, 20 years down the road?
Now you will do as I say.
Yes, master.
You will go out and find me some food.
Yes, master.
Luckily, the Drachea orchid is not looking for lunch, but love. It won't produce seeds without the help of its slightly confused pollinator. While the tenon wasp
Number 7.
Our countdown of extreme gardeners continues with a tree that feeds all kinds of creatures. It's the fig. However, the tree's flowers would never get pollinated if it wasn't for the work of the tiny gardener crawling in to number 7 in the countdown, the female fig wasp. Fig trees are unique because their flowers are completely enclosed within the fruit. So the female wasp has to force her way through a narrow opening. Even though she's small enough to fit through the eye of a needle, it's such a tight squeeze that she has to shed her wings. But she doesn't wipe off the pollen she's carrying from another fruit because it's trapped in a hollow on her chest. Inside, she looks for a place to lay her eggs, and in the process, she wipes the male pollen onto the fig's female reproductive organs. The female fig wasp is number 7 in the countdown because without her careful pollination, there would be no fig tree. And unlike the tinnin wasp, this tiny gardener spends much of her life actually inside the plant she pollinates. Her offspring hatch, grow, and even mate inside the fig. They only leave when males drill holes in the walls of the fruit, setting free the next generation of pollen-coated females to fly off in search of another tree. There are about 1,000 species of fig, and amazingly, each appears to have co-evolved with at least one fig wasp that pollinates its flowers and allows the trees to reproduce. But while few people ever notice all the hard work of the fig wasp, there's no mistaking the effort put in by our next contender. It's a gardener that shaped the trees of a continent.
Number 6.
Every gardener knows that with regular pruning, a hedge can be turned into all kinds of shapes. And since 1912 in Rhode Island, the Green Animals Topiary Garden has been home to 21 different species of bushy beast. You can even find our next contender, because when it comes to pruning, nothing beats a giraffe. This walking hedge trimmer is number 6 in the countdown because it plays a major part in defining the nature of the African landscape. Giraffes love eating acacia trees and can pluck more than 75 pounds of leaves every day. Their leathery 20-inch long tongue seems unaffected by the acacia's spiniest defenses. Giraffe browsing is so severe that it can seriously damage trees and alter the way they grow. With years of pruning, the shape of the acacia changes constantly. Eventually, it develops a waist at about head height, where giraffes feed most easily. Then, when the very center of the tree is out of reach, it can finally escape from even the tallest hungry mouths. Acacias are the dominant trees over much of sub-Saharan Africa, and they get their characteristic umbrella shape thanks to the 4-legged hedge trimmers that are number 6 in the countdown. But the acacias are not the only trees that have been shaped by careful pruning. There's one tree that's 400 years old and stands only a few inches tall. Welcome to the Oakland Bonsai Garden in Northern California. It's run by the Bonsai Society of San Francisco and each plant has been carefully shaped to produce the illusion of age, as Andrea Burho explains.
You should be able to feel that you could stand under that tree and be out in the wild with it.
The word bonsai comes from the Japanese for tray growing. By limiting root growth and careful clipping, a tree which normally grows over 20 feet tall can be shrunk to just a few inches. And they can be ancient. This garden contains a black pine called Pacific King that's estimated to be 400 years old. This is not a tree that you'd give to a giraffe to prune. In Africa, giraffes actually make acacia trees taller, not shorter. And these are hard-working hedge trimmers. Giraffes can spend more than 16 hours a day feeding. This dedication to gardening is why they've eaten their way into number 6 in the countdown.
Number 5.
The rainforests of Western Africa are home to the next contender in our countdown of extreme gardeners. It's a 400-pound weed eater, the gorilla. One male can chew his way through 40 pounds of vegetation every day. He has over 200 species of plant to choose from, but he's not greedy. He selectively prunes the forest, which, just like the giraffe, can affect the way the plants in his garden grow. What's more, a recent study has shown that he remembers where he's been eating and will deliberately avoid that area to let it regenerate. Gorillas are number 5 in the countdown because their careful pruning stimulates new growth in the jungle. They also play a vital role in the dispersal of seeds, depositing them with a generous dollop of gorilla fertilizer to encourage new seedlings to sprout. However, when it comes to planting seeds, not even these heavyweights can compete with the smallest kangaroo in the world.
Number 4.
Australia's tropical rainforests are home to a very strange and very ancient gardener. With a lineage that stretches back over 15 million years, the world's oldest living kangaroo is the Hipsey. Hipsey is short for Hypsiprimnodon, a guinea pig-sized marsupial that looks as much like a possum as a kangaroo. It has a real fondness for fruit, and in times of plenty, it'll store them for later by carefully burying them underground. The Hipsey is number 4 in the countdown because each season it can bury more than 700 different fruit. And while this keeps its food safe from other fruit eaters, unfortunately the Hipsey's not been blessed with the world's greatest memory. Forgotten fruit germinate, sometimes more than 200 feet away from the parent tree. Here they stand a better chance of survival because they no longer have to compete with the adult for space, sun, and nutrients. However, some seed will be buried on the other side of the world, not in the forest, but deep under ice. On the island of Spitsbergen, far above the Arctic Circle, the Norwegian government has hollowed out an old coal mine and is using it to store seed buried. However, this forgetful gardener is also doing its bit for the environment. By carefully planting seeds away from the competition, the Hipsey not only helps the forest regenerate, but digs itself into number 4 in the countdown.
Number 3.
The next contender in our countdown of extreme gardeners lives deep inside these castles of clay. Termites may appear to be unlikely gardeners. After all, what plant can grow in the darkness at the heart of a termite mound? And while the massive queen of the colony doesn't need any light, she does need food if she's to keep on producing 15 eggs every minute. The only trouble is that the queen and the 5 million other hungry mouths in the colony can't digest the tough woody cellulose found in the plants they eat. So that's why the queen produces babies that will grow into the best gardeners in Africa. No other animal is better at turning feces into fungus. When foraging workers return with a belly full of chewed up plants, they all go to the toilet in the fungus garden. Here, 6-legged gardeners cultivate a white fungus that only grows on termite toilets. When the fungus breaks down the cellulose, the termites eat the fungus. The huge white garden can weigh more than 50 pounds. That's a lot of mushrooms. And so's the fungus farm. So perhaps that's why our next contender cuts out the middleman simply by building its garden inside its body.
Number 2.
In 1951, author John Wyndham wrote a novel about a terrifying plant that could not only move, but turned us into food.
Doesn't seem to have any central nervous system.
Then how does it move?
All plants move. They don't usually pull themselves out of the ground and chase you.
And while our next contender doesn't have to deal with the man-eating monster from the day of the Triffids, there is a plant on the islands of Palau that's found a most unusual way to move. And it relies on swarms of the animals swimming in to number 2 in the countdown, the jellyfish. The story begins millions of years ago, when a coral reef rose from the sea, trapping jellyfish in a landlocked saltwater lake. Safe inside their private pool, these extreme jellies became vegetarian. The stinging cells on their tentacles disappeared, and they came to rely on a most remarkable garden. Now, millions of jellyfish have become synchronized sun worshippers. They're number 2 in the countdown because they spend their lives looking after plants 24 hours a day. Imagine if we were like the jellyfish. How would you like to have plants living in your skin? If we were like some jellyfishes and corals, we'd have millions of microscopic algae inside our body. The algae collect sunlight and photosynthesize, creating sugars and proteins for their use and ours. And in return, we just have to make sure that we carry the plants to the parts of the lake with the most sunshine. And when the sun goes down, so do we. We'd migrate down to the bottom of the lake to collect nitrates and phosphates to fertilize the algae cells. Then it's up with the sun and the cycle continues.
Number 1.
The most extreme gardener in the countdown lives deep in the Amazonian rainforests of Peru. You can see its work in cleared areas of jungle that are called the Devil's Gardens. The mysterious tracts of vegetation were not created by tribes living in the forest. These people are gardeners in their own right, creating small gaps in the jungle to cultivate their crops. Something else created the Devil's Gardens. The locals tell stories of an evil spirit, a mythical dwarf called Chuiachaki. He often appears as a friend or family member to lone travelers in the jungle and then leads them in circles until they're lost. Chuiachaki is said to live in the Devil's Gardens, which is why people stay away from the strange clearings where you can find only one species of tree. And the legend is partly true. No human hand made the Devil's Gardens. They were created by the animal scurrying in to number 1 in the countdown, the lemon ant. These tiny gardeners make their homes inside the stems of the only tree found in the Devil's Garden, and they'll defend their home from all intruders. They'll even weed out other competing plants. Their aim is to create space in the forest for the single species of tree they live in. This is how the ant colony expands as it moves into nesting sites within new saplings. Taking on a jungle isn't easy, but these gardeners come equipped with a horrible herbicide. Each ant is armed with a sting that's used on both invading animals and plants. They inject their venom of formic acid into the leaves, which soon removes all competition. Lemon ants are number 1 in the countdown because colonies can create clearings that cover 14,000 square feet and are estimated to be over 800 years old. A garden that size could contain 15,000 queens and 3 million workers. It requires extraordinary dedication to maintain a clearing in a lush tropical jungle. And yet, for centuries, these tiny gardeners have been cultivating their host trees and killing off weeds. No other animal can compete with the countdown's hardest working horticulturalist. Which is why, when it comes to gardening, the lemon ant really is the most extreme.